My name is Heidi Baker. I'm 28 years old. 3 weeks ago, my own mother looked me dead in the eyes and said with a smile, Madison is finally giving us a real grandchild. We'll cut her ribbon first. Your wedding can wait. It's not like anyone important is showing up anyway. They walked out 45 minutes before I walked down the aisle. When they strutted back in, two strangers were sitting comfortably in their front row seats. My mother immediately started yelling and ordering them to move. My father barked, "This is our daughter's wedding, get the hell out." Then the man walking me down the aisle slowly turned around to face them. In that single second, their faces drained of all color, because the daughter they had spent 13 years mocking, sabotaging, and treating like garbage had just served them the most public humiliation of their lives. And what happened in the next 10 minutes would make them regret every single time they chose Madison over me. Before I go on, if this story already makes your blood boil and hits close to home, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely feel it. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time right now. I need to go back. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand the pattern that started long before I was even old enough to question it. For 28 years, I was the shadow in my own family photos. Always there, but never the focus. Diane and Jeffrey Baker had one golden child, Madison. And I was the reminder of a previous life my father wanted to forget. My 8th birthday was the first time I remember being erased. My mom, Diane, had promised me a party. Pink vanilla cake from Anderson's bakery, streamers, 6 of my friends from school. I'd picked out a dress 2 weeks early, white with pink flowers. I remember feeling so excited I could barely sleep. The morning of my party, Madison fell off her bike. She was 10, scraped her knee, not even bleeding that badly. But Diane scooped her up like she'd broken her spine and rushed her to the emergency room. Dad went with them. I got a text at 9 in the morning. Madison needs stitches, sweetie. We'll do your party next weekend. Madison got 2 stitches. She was fine by dinner. Next weekend never came. That wasn't the only time. There were piano recitals where I played my heart out in a velvet dress my grandmother on my father's side had bought me, only for Diane to arrive late because Madison had a meltdown over her ballet tights. Soccer games where I scored the winning goal in the state semifinals. My coach actually pulled my parents aside to congratulate them. They weren't there. They were at Madison's cheer competition 2 towns over. I started keeping a secret journal when I was 12. Not the kind with hearts and crushes, just dates and events. March 14th, school play. Got the lead. Mom and Dad at Madison's orthodontist appointment. I didn't know why I did it. I just knew that writing it down made the emptiness feel slightly less heavy. The cake sat in our fridge for 3 days. Nobody remembered it was there. I ate a slice by myself on the 4th day. It tasted like cardboard. I was 8. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I wasn't supposed to want things. But that was before I understood what I was competing against. It wasn't Madison. It was money I didn't know existed. High school graduation 2015. I was valedictorian. 4 years of straight A's. National Honor Society. Full scholarship to Boston University. The ceremony was at 2 in the afternoon. At 9 that morning, Diane called me. Madison's dance team made finals. It's in Portland. We have to leave now. Portland was 4 hours away. I said, but my speech is at 2:30. She said, I know, honey. We're so proud of you. We'll celebrate when we get back. They didn't come back that night. Madison's team placed 3rd. Diane posted 12 pictures on Facebook. 0 pictures of me. There were 2 empty seats in the front row during my speech. Right in the center where parents are supposed to sit. Nathan's parents were there. Andrew and Caroline Sullivan. I'd met them exactly twice. Nathan and I had been dating for 3 months. They drove an hour to watch me give a 7-minute speech to a gym full of strangers. Caroline handed me flowers after. White roses. She said, "Your parents are missing out." I didn't cry until I got home. I hung my Boston University acceptance letter on my bedroom wall. Full scholarship. $62,000 a year covered. My parents walked past that frame every single day for 4 years. They never mentioned it. Not once. In 2015, the summer before college, I thought maybe things would get better. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, made them proud, maybe they'd see me. I was wrong. The summer after my freshman year, I got an internship at a marketing firm in Boston. Unpaid, but good experience. I came home for a weekend in July to tell them about it. Diane was in the kitchen when I walked in. I said, "I got the internship." They said I'm one of the strongest applicants they've had. She looked up from her phone. "That's great, sweetie." Then her phone buzzed. She smiled. Madison just texted. She got into the regional showcase for her art portfolio. The rest of dinner was about Madison. I stopped talking about my achievements after that. April 2015. I was 17, 2 weeks from graduation. Diane had planned a family dinner to celebrate my acceptance to Boston, Italian place called Marcello's, Dad's favorite. The reservation was for 6. That morning, Madison woke up with stomach pain. Diane rushed her to the ER. "Possible appendicitis," she said. "We'll reschedule dinner, okay?" By 2 in the afternoon, Madison was discharged. Diagnosis: gas and anxiety. Discharge time on the paperwork: 5:43 p.m. Our reservation was at 6. Diane called me at 5:30. "Everyone's exhausted, honey. We'll do dinner another time." I said, "Okay." We never rescheduled. I found the hospital paperwork a week later in the recycling bin. I looked at the diagnosis. I looked at the discharge time. And I started wondering if I was losing my mind, because the pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. But I didn't have proof yet. I just had a feeling in my gut that something was deeply wrong, and that feeling wouldn't go away. College passed in a blur of trying to prove I was worth remembering. Dean's List every semester. Internships every summer. I graduated summa cum laude in 2019. Diane and Jeffrey came to my college graduation. They sat in the back. They left before the reception. I stood on that stage in my cap and gown, summa cum laude sash across my chest, scanning the crowd for their faces even though I already knew they weren't staying. Later that night, alone in my dorm, I opened a bottle of cheap champagne Nathan had left for me and cried until my eyes were swollen. Not because I needed their validation anymore, but because some part of me still hoped they would choose me just once. That was the summer I started therapy for the first time. Dr. Ramona Chen would later become my anchor, but back then I only went twice before quitting. I wasn't ready to admit how deep the wound went. Madison had a gallery opening that night. Diane posted 17 photos. I got one text. "Congrats." By 2023, I'd stopped expecting anything. I was working at a digital marketing agency in Boston. Small company called Apex Digital. I liked my job. I was good at it. In March, they promoted me to senior coordinator. My salary jumped from $62,000 to $78,000. I was 26. It felt like the first real win I'd had in years. I called my parents that night. Diane answered. "That's wonderful, Heidi," she said. "We're so proud of you." I could hear the smile in her voice. For a second, I thought maybe things were changing. Then she said, "Madison has news too. She's engaged." And just like that, my promotion became a footnote. The family group chat exploded. 47 messages in 2 hours. All about Madison's ring, her fiancé Tyler, wedding planning, venue ideas. I sent a message congratulating Madison. Diane replied with a heart emoji. My promotion got one message. From Madison. "That's awesome, Heidi. You deserve it." I stared at my phone for a long time that night, and I started keeping a list. Graduation, promotion, scholarship, internship. Every milestone I'd ever had. And next to each one, I wrote what had happened, what Madison had needed, what emergency had erased me. The list was 13 items long. I didn't know what to do with it, but I kept it. In January 2025, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Ramona Chen. I told her about the pattern, the missed graduations, the canceled dinners, the empty seats. She asked me, "When was the last time your family showed up for you without conditions?" I couldn't answer. She said, "Do you think you deserve to take up space?" I didn't say anything. She handed me a notebook. "I want you to write down every time you feel erased. Not for them, for you. So you can see it's not in your head." I started writing. By July, I had 53 entries, but I didn't have the answer yet. I didn't know why. I just knew that every time I grew, Madison needed something bigger, and I didn't know yet that the need had a price tag. Nathan proposed in August 2025. We'd been together for 10 years. Since sophomore year of college, he was a software engineer, steady, kind, the kind of person who showed up when he said he would. He proposed on a hiking trail outside Boston, the same trail where we'd had our first date. He got down on one knee and said, "I see you, Heidi. I've always seen you." The ring was a sapphire, not a diamond. Blue, like the sky that day. I said yes before he finished asking. The ring felt perfect on my finger. Simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen. We sat on a fallen log overlooking the trail, the late summer sun warming our skin. Nathan pulled out a small picnic he'd hidden in his backpack. Cheese, crackers, and the same kind of sparkling cider we drank on our first date. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Someone had planned something just for me, down to the smallest detail. When I called my parents that night, the contrast hit harder than ever. Their lukewarm response made the ring on my finger feel even heavier, a beautiful reminder of what real love actually looked like. I called my parents that night. I was crying, happy for the first time in years. Diane answered on the third ring. I said, "Nathan proposed." There was a pause. Then she said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When's the date?" Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Tell me everything." Just, "When's the date?" I said we were thinking August 2026, after my 29th birthday. She said, "That's so far away? Are you sure you want to wait that long?" I said I wanted time to plan. She said, "Or time to change your mind." I didn't understand the urgency in her voice. Not then. We set the date for August 15th, 2026. Signed the contract with Riverside Gardens on August 20th, 2025. Put down an $8,000 deposit. Nathan asked me what kind of wedding I wanted. I said, "Small, meaningful, people who actually want to be there." He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. We invited 200 people, mostly his family, his friends, my coworkers, a handful of college friends. My side of the invite list was 12 people. Parents, Madison, Tyler, a cousin I barely talked to. Nathan's mom, Caroline, said, "You deserve a day where people celebrate you." I almost cried. 3 weeks after we got engaged, an envelope arrived in the mail. Certified. Return address, Cooper and Hastings Estate Law. I opened it alone in my apartment. Nathan was at work. The letter was 2 pages, typed on heavy cream stationery. Professional, formal. It started, "Dear Ms. Baker, I am writing regarding the Catherine Whitman Trust established in your name in 1997. My hands started shaking. I didn't know anyone named Catherine Whitman. By the second paragraph, I was sitting on the floor. By the end, I understood why I'd spent 28 years feeling like a ghost. The letter said my biological mother, Catherine Whitman, had died giving birth to me on April 14th, 1997. I was 28 years old. I'd thought Diane was my mother my entire life. The letter said Catherine's mother, Eleanor Whitman, had established a trust fund in my name, $3.6 million. The condition: I had to marry before my 29th birthday. If I didn't, the money would revert to a medical research fund. The letter was signed by Lawrence Cooper, a state attorney. At the bottom, handwritten in blue ink, "I believe there are parties who may have withheld this information from you. We should meet." I read the letter 4 times. Then I called the number at the top. Lawrence Cooper's office was downtown. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. He was 62, gray hair, kind eyes. He shook my hand and said, "Thank you for coming." I sat down. I said, "I didn't know my mother was dead." He nodded slowly. "I suspected as much." He opened a folder. Inside was a copy of my birth certificate. Mother, Catherine Ann Whitman. Father, Jeffrey Daniel Baker. Catherine had died 12 hours after I was born. Complications from childbirth. Jeffrey had been a widower at 30, alone with a newborn. He married Diane Morrison a year and a half later. Diane legally adopted me when I was 2. I stared at the documents. I said, "Why didn't they tell me?" Lawrence said, "I don't know. But I believe your stepmother discovered the trust documents in 2012. He slid another folder across the desk. I flipped through page after page in stunned silence. Every single entry was written in Diane's neat, looping handwriting. She hadn't just taken advantage of coincidences. She had manufactured them. Doctors' appointments moved. Fake emergencies created. Even Madison's anxiety attacks seemed suspiciously timed. Lawrence watched me carefully, giving me time to process. This wasn't neglect, Heidi. This was a calculated campaign. Your stepmother saw you as a threat to her financial security and her position in the family. She wanted to keep you small, uncertain, and dependent. My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. 13 years of my life reduced to strategic calendar blocks. I felt nauseous, then furious, then strangely relieved. At least, now I knew I wasn't crazy. Inside were printouts, screenshots of Diane's digital calendar. June 18, 2012. A note. Trust doc in Jeffrey's office. H turns 28 April 2025. Marriage clause. Must monitor. My stomach dropped. Lawrence said, "Your grandmother hired a private investigator last year. We obtained these through legal discovery." He flipped to another page. Calendar entry from April 9th, 2005. H birthday party. Reschedule M bike accident. Keep H expecting, then cancel last minute. June 6th, 2015. H graduation. M competition Portland. Must attend M's event. H speech equals confidence boost equals risk. March 10th, 2023. H promotion. M engagement same week. Shift focus. 13 years of entries. Every milestone I'd ever had. Every crisis Madison had ever needed. All of it planned. Lawrence said quietly, "Your stepmother has been sabotaging you since you were 15. I couldn't breathe. He showed me one more document, an email, drafted December 14th, 2023. Addressed to Eleanor Whitman, never sent. Found in Diane's drafts during the investigation. Subject: Heidi's development. Eleanor, I want to assure you that Heidi is adjusting well to adult life. However, she remains quite uncertain about relationships. She struggles with self-worth, as you might expect from someone with her background. Between you and me, I doubt she'll be confident enough to marry before 29. The trust fund is safe from premature disbursement. Diane." I read it 3 times. Lawrence said, "She wasn't just neglecting you. She was documenting your unworthiness. to justify the trust failing. I said, "She doesn't get the money either way." He said, "No, but she'd rather you get nothing than see you win." I sat there for a long time. Then I said, "What happens if I don't marry before I turn 29? He said, "The principal reverts to a medical research fund. You receive nothing." I said, "And if I do?" He said, "Full disbursement within 30 days of marriage, $3.6 million." I looked at him. I said, "Does she know I know?" He said, "Not yet." I said, "Good." Lawrence handed me another envelope. Cream stationery. Handwritten address. "This is from your grandmother, Eleanor Whitman. She's been waiting to meet you." I opened it. The letter was 2 pages, written in careful, slanted script. "My darling Heidi, your mother Catherine loved you before she ever saw your face. I've watched you from a distance your whole life. Scholarships, achievements, moments I wished I could celebrate with you. The adoption terms prohibited contact until you turn 28. I've been waiting for this day. You are braver than you know. When you're ready, I'd like to meet you. But only if you want to meet me. Your grandmother, Eleanor." At the bottom, she'd written her phone number. I called her that night. Eleanor Whitman lived in a brownstone in Back Bay. She answered the door herself. She was 72. Silver hair pulled back in a low bun. She was wearing a cream cardigan and pearl earrings. When she saw me, she put her hand over her mouth. Then she hugged me. She held me for a long time. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. She said, "You look just like her." We sat in her living room. She showed me photos. Catherine at my age. Catherine pregnant. Catherine in a hospital bed, holding a bundle of blankets. Me. Eleanor said, "She knew she might not make it. The doctors warned her. But she wanted you more than anything." I said, "What was she like?" Eleanor smiled. Stubborn, kind. She loved poetry. She wanted to be a teacher. I said, "Would she be proud of me?" Eleanor took my hand. She already was. I met with Lawrence 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. We went through everything: the trust terms, the marriage condition, the legal justification. I said, "Is this even legal? Tying money to marriage?" He said, "Yes. It's called an incentive trust. Your grandmother structured it carefully. Marriage before 29, or demonstrated financial independence through other means. Marriage was the primary path, but not the only one." I said, "What if I never wanted to marry?" He said, "At 30, you'd receive the principal in installments regardless. The marriage clause wasn't coercion. Your grandmother believed choosing a partner demonstrates self-worth. She wanted you to feel confident enough to be loved." I thought about that for a long time. Then I said, "I'm engaged." We set the date for August 15th. Lawrence looked at me. "After your birthday?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's cutting it very close. Your birthday is April 14th. You'd be turning 29. The trust expires if you're unmarried on that date." I said, "I know." He waited. I said, "I want to move the wedding up." Nathan and I talked that night. I showed him everything: the letter, the calendar, the email, the photos of Catherine. He read it all. Then he looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to move the wedding to February." He said, "That's 6 months early. Why?" I said, "I need to know something, and I need to know it before I turn 29. He said, "What do you need to know?" I said, "I need to know if they'll destroy this too." He understood immediately. He said, "This is a test." I said, "Yes." He said, "And if they fail?" I said, "Then 200 people will watch them lose me." Nathan took my hand. He said, "I'm with you." We called the venue on December 10th. Riverside Gardens had an opening on February 15th, 2026. Saturday, 2 p.m. ceremony. We signed a new contract, paid the change fee, sent out updated invitations. Planning the wedding in half the usual time was stressful, but strangely empowering. I chose every detail myself. The ivory dress with cap sleeves, the simple wildflower centerpieces, the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Nathan's mother Caroline became my biggest supporter, helping me pick out favors and even sewing personalized handkerchiefs for the bridal party with my new initials. Every time Diane called to help, I gave her minimal information. The less she knew, the less she could sabotage. I could feel her growing suspicion, but she still believed she controlled the narrative. I called Diane on December 12th. I said, "We move the wedding up, February 15th. There was a pause. 7 seconds of silence. Then she said, "That's very sudden." I said, "We didn't want to wait." She said, "Is everything okay? You're not pregnant, are you?" I said, "No. We just want to be married." She said, "Well, congratulations. That'll be here before you know it." I could hear something in her voice. Panic, maybe, or suspicion. I said, "I'll send you the new details." She said, "Of course. We'll be there." After I hung up, Nathan said, "She's scared." I said, "Good." January came fast. Work picked up. Wedding planning took over my evenings. I barely had time to think. On January 3rd, Madison called me. She said, "I have news." I said, "What's up?" She said, "I'm pregnant." I stopped walking. I was on my way to grab lunch. I stood in the middle of the sidewalk. I said, "That's amazing. Congratulations." She said, "3 months. We're doing a big reveal photo shoot. Ribbons and everything." I said, "That sounds perfect." She said, "I know your wedding's coming up. I hope this doesn't overshadow anything." I said, "Of course not. I'm happy for you, Madison." And I meant it, because Madison wasn't the villain here. She was a pawn. After we hung up, I waited. 2 days later, Diane called. She started with small talk. Asked about work. Asked about Nathan. Then she said, "Madison's photo shoot is going to be beautiful. The photographer she hired does influencer-level work." I said, "That's great." She said, "The thing is, the photographer's only available on certain dates, and one of them is February 15th. I didn't say anything. She said, "I know that's your wedding day, but the shoot is only 11 to 1. The photographer is booked solid for months. This is Madison's first baby. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment." I said, "So is a wedding." She said, "Of course, but you can get married any time. This is about family legacy." I felt my jaw tighten. I said, "What are you asking me?" She said, "The photo shoot is at Lakeview Gardens. That's only 35 minutes from your venue. We can cut the ribbon at 12:30, leave by 1:15, and be at Riverside by 2. I said, "The ceremony starts at 2. She said, "We'll be there. You won't even notice we were gone." I looked at the ceiling. I thought about Lawrence, about the calendar entries, about 13 years of this exact script. I said, "Okay." She said, "Okay?" I said, "Do what you need to do." She said, "Heidi, if you're upset." I said, "I'm not upset. Go to Madison's event, she needs you." There was another pause. She said, "We love you. You know that, right?" I said, "I know exactly how much you love me, Mom. I'll see you Saturday." I hung up. Nathan was sitting on the couch. He said, "She took the bait." I said, "She always does." The next day, Diane sent a group text. "So grateful Heidi understands how important Madison's moment is. Family supports family." Madison replied with a heart emoji. Jeffrey replied, "Proud of you both." I didn't reply. I forwarded the screenshot to Lawrence. I typed, "Evidence of premeditation." He replied, "See you Saturday." February 15th arrived like any other day. I woke up at 6. The sun was just starting to rise. Nathan was already awake. He said, "Last chance to call them." I said, "No, this is exactly how it needs to be." I got ready slowly. Hair and makeup at 9. The bridesmaids arrived at 10. My dress was simple. Ivory. Cap sleeves. My choice. Not the big ball gown Diane had kept suggesting. At noon, I heard a knock on the bridal suite door. One of the bridesmaids opened it. Diane was standing there. She was wearing a lavender dress, perfectly pressed, hair done, makeup flawless. She said, "Can I talk to Heidi? Just for a minute." Mother-daughter moment. The bridesmaids looked at me. I nodded. Diane came in. The door closed behind her. She looked at me in the mirror. She said, "You look beautiful, honey." I didn't say anything. She said, "Madison's photo shoot is running a little long. The photographer can only do noon to 2. I met her eyes in the reflection. She said, "Madison is finally giving us a real grandchild. We'll cut her ribbon first. Your wedding can wait. It's not like anyone important is showing up anyway." The room went silent. One of the bridesmaids made a small noise, like she'd been slapped. I stared at Diane. She was smiling. Not a cruel smile. A patient one. Like she was doing me a favor. Like she was explaining something I should already understand. I said nothing. She said, "You understand, right? Family supports family." My hand was gripping the edge of the makeup counter. My knuckles were white. I turned to face her. I said, "Okay." She blinked. "Okay?" I said, "Go." She said, "You're not upset?" I said, "Would it matter if I was?" She paused. Then she smiled again. Forced. Tight. She said, "We'll be back, I promise." I said, "Sure you will." She hugged me. I stood there like stone. When she left, I pulled out my phone. I texted Lawrence one word. Now. At 1:15, I watched from the bridal suite window as Diane and Jeffrey walked out of Riverside Gardens. Early guests were arriving. They saw my parents leaving. I could see them whispering. One of the bridesmaids said, "Are they serious?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do you want us to stop them?" I said, "No. Let them go." The photographer I'd secretly hired, a friend of Nathan's from college who specialized in documentary-style weddings, moved quietly around the venue, capturing everything. I wanted proof. Not for revenge at that moment, but because I knew one day I might need to see this day exactly as it happened. The photographer I'd hired, specifically for this, captured it all. My parents walking out, Diane checking her watch, Jeffrey looking annoyed. I turned away from the window. Nathan's best man knocked on the door. "Heidi, Lawrence Cooper is here?" I said, "Send him in." Lawrence was wearing a charcoal suit, pale blue tie. He looked every bit the distinguished attorney. He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You don't have to do this publicly. We can handle it quietly. After." I said, "She ruined 13 years of my life in private. The truth deserves an audience." He nodded. "Then let's give it one." At 1:45, Eleanor Whitman arrived. She was wearing a navy dress. Elegant. Understated. She hugged me carefully so she wouldn't wrinkle my dress. She said, "Your mother would be so proud. Not because you're getting married, because you're standing up." I said, "Are you ready for this?" She said, "I've been ready for 28 years." She was wearing a locket, gold, oval-shaped. She opened it. Inside was a photo. Catherine in a hospital bed, holding a tiny baby wrapped in pink blankets. Me. Eleanor said, She held you for 6 hours. That was all the time she had. But she loved you for every second. I couldn't speak. She closed the locket. She said, "You wear this today. She'll be with you." She fastened it around my neck. 2 o'clock. The string quartet started playing. Pachelbel's canon. Guests stood. 200 people. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle. Then the groomsmen. Row 1, seats 3 and 4, reserved for the Baker family, were occupied. Eleanor Whitman sat in seat 3. Lawrence Cooper sat in seat 4. I could hear the murmurs. Who are they? Where are her parents? Nathan's parents, Andrew and Caroline Sullivan, sat in seats 5 and 6. They were smiling. They knew. The music shifted. I stepped into the doorway. Lawrence was waiting for me. He offered his arm. I took it. We started walking. Halfway down the aisle, I was at row 5. The back doors banged open. Every head turned. Diane and Jeffrey rushed in, out of breath, flustered. Diane's hair was windblown. Jeffrey's tie was crooked. They froze when they saw the aisle, saw me, saw Lawrence. Diane's eyes went to row 1, to the strangers in their seats. Her face twisted. She walked quickly toward the front row. Jeffrey followed. She said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Excuse me, those are our seats. Move." Eleanor didn't move. Lawrence didn't move. Jeffrey said louder, "This is our daughter's wedding. Get the hell out." I was standing in the aisle, frozen, Lawrence's arm still in mine. The entire ceremony had stopped. The officiant was silent. Nathan was at the altar, staring. And then Lawrence did something I'll never forget. He turned, slowly, deliberately. He looked at Jeffrey and Diane, didn't say a word, just looked. And Jeffrey's face. The color drained, his mouth opened, then closed. He whispered hoarse to Diane, "That's the lawyer." Diane said, "What lawyer?" Jeffrey said, "From 1997. Diane's face went white. In that single second they understood. Whatever they'd buried 28 years ago had just dug itself up. The usher, one of Nathan's groomsmen, stepped forward. He said quietly but firmly, "Sir, ma'am, those seats are reserved for the Baker family." Diane's voice cracked. "I am the Baker family." The usher said, "Please take seats in the back. The ceremony is in progress." People were filming on their phones. I could see the screens glowing. Jeffrey grabbed Diane's arm. He pulled her toward the back row. She was shaking. I could see it from where I stood. They sat in the last row, on the end, as far from the front as possible. Lawrence turned back to me. He said quietly, "Shall we?" I nodded. We kept walking. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on Nathan. He was crying. Not sad tears. Something else. Pride, maybe. Or relief. When I reached the altar, Lawrence placed my hand in Nathan's. He said, loud enough for the first few rows to hear, "It's an honor." Nathan said, "Thank you, sir." Lawrence stepped back. He sat down next to Eleanor. The officiant cleared his throat. He said, "We are gathered here today." I could feel Diane staring at the back of my head. I could feel her panic, her confusion. I didn't care. The vows were simple. Nathan said, "I promise to see you. Every day, even when you can't see yourself." I said, "I promise to never make you earn my love. I promise to show up. I promise to stay." When he slipped the ring on my finger, I looked down. Simple gold band. Inside, engraved, "You are always enough." I heard someone in the audience sob. It wasn't Diane. The officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Nathan kissed me. And in the back row, I heard Diane crying. Not from joy, from loss. The reception started at 3. Cocktail hour. Open bar. Hors d'oeuvres. People were laughing, congratulating us, taking photos. Diane and Jeffrey approached me near the champagne table. Diane's face was tight. Forced smile. She said, "Congratulations, sweetheart. We're so sorry we were late. Traffic was..." I said, "It's fine. You made it." She said, "Who was that man? The one who walked you down?" I said, "That was Lawrence Cooper, my estate attorney." Her smile froze. Jeffrey wouldn't meet my eyes. Diane said, "Your estate attorney?" I said, "Yes. He's been managing my trust fund since 1997. The champagne glass in her hand shook. Just slightly. She said, "I don't understand." I said, "You will. During the toasts." I walked away. At 3:15, Madison arrived. She hadn't been at the ceremony. She'd stayed at the photo shoot. She was glowing, showing everyone pictures on her phone, pink and blue ribbons. Instagram-perfect shots. She hugged me. She said, "I'm so sorry I missed the ceremony. How was it?" I said, "It was perfect. Exactly what I needed." She said, "Who walked you down?" "Dad said it wasn't him." I said, "Someone who actually showed up for me." She looked confused. She glanced at Diane. Diane looked away. Madison said, "Did I miss something?" I said, "Yeah, but you'll catch up in about 20 minutes. Dinner was served at 4:30. The head table was me, Nathan, the bridesmaids, and groomsmen. Table 8, not the family table, held Diane, Jeffrey, Madison, and Tyler. Madison kept looking over at me. Worried. The best man gave his toast. Funny. Sweet. Everyone laughed. The maid of honor gave hers. Emotional. Heartfelt. Then Lawrence Cooper stood. The room went quiet. People whispered, "Who's that?" Lawrence walked to the microphone. He was holding a manila folder. Diane's face drained of color. He tapped the mic twice. He said, "Good evening. My name is Lawrence Cooper. I'm an estate attorney, and I'm here to tell you about a woman named Catherine Whitman." He spoke for 10 minutes. He told them Catherine had died giving birth to me on April 14th, 1997. He told them about Eleanor, about the trust fund, $3.6 million. He told them about the condition, marriage before 29. He said, Catherine wanted to ensure her daughter would grow up confident enough to choose love. The room was silent. He pulled out a document, projected it on the screen behind him, the trust papers, Catherine's signature at the bottom. He said, unfortunately, there were parties who didn't want Heidi to succeed. He paused, looked directly at Diane. Then he projected the calendar entries, one by one. April 9th, 2005. H birthday, M bike accident, cancel party. June 6th, 2015. H graduation, M competition, attend M's. March 10th, 2023. H promotion, M engagement same week. The room gasped. Someone said, "Oh my God," Lawrence said. For 13 years, Mrs. Diane Baker systematically sabotaged every milestone Heidi achieved. The goal, to prevent Heidi from developing the confidence to marry before 29, to ensure the trust fund would expire. Diane tried to stand. Jeffrey pulled her back down. Lawrence wasn't done. He said, in December 2023, Mrs. Baker drafted correspondence regarding Heidi's likelihood of marriage. He projected the email, not the whole thing, just an excerpt. However, she remains quite uncertain about relationships. I doubt she'll be confident enough to marry before 29. The room erupted. People were staring at Diane, whispering, pointing. Lawrence said, calm and measured, "This email was never sent, but it reveals intent. For 13 years, Mrs. Baker worked to ensure Heidi would fail." Madison was staring at the screen, at her own name, used as a weapon. She looked at Diane, whispered, "Mom?" Diane couldn't answer. Lawrence said, Mrs. Baker, you spent 13 years making Heidi believe she wasn't enough. He paused. Today, she proved you wrong. And she did it in front of 200 people who actually love her. Diane stood. She was crying, shaking. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. She turned and fled, walked out of the reception hall. Jeffrey stood. He looked at me. Across the room. He mouthed, I'm sorry. Then he followed Diane. The room was silent for 3 full seconds. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. Standing ovation. Not for Diane leaving. For me. For the truth. The rest of the night felt like a dream and a fever all at once. Guests kept coming up to hug me, many of them crying. Old co-workers who had no idea what my family was like told me they were proud of me. Nathan never left my side, his hand steady on my lower back. Madison found me near the dessert table later. Her mascara was ruined. She kept apologizing, repeating that she truly thought I was okay with the photo shoot. I believed her. She had been raised in the same distorted reality I had, only she was the golden child. Breaking free would take her time, just like it took me. Eleanor Whitman stood. She asked for the microphone. Lawrence handed it to her. She said, I'm Eleanor Whitman, Heidi's grandmother. I haven't been allowed in her life for 28 years, but I've watched her from a distance. Scholarships, achievements, moments I wished I could celebrate. Her voice shook. Today, I get to tell her what her mother would have said. You are loved. You were always loved. And you are enough. She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope. She handed it to me. Inside was a piece of paper. Yellowed. Handwritten. Catherine's diary entry. April 13th, 1997. If I don't make it tomorrow, tell her she was wanted. Tell her she was loved before she took her first breath. Tell her she's enough. C. I couldn't breathe. Eleanor said, She knew, Heidi. Even before you were born, she knew. I held my mother's words for the first time, and I understood. I was never the problem. I was just born to the wrong people. And today, I chose the right ones. Madison came up to me after. Her face was wet. She said, I didn't know. Heidi, I swear I didn't know. I said, I believe you. She said, Did she really say that to you? The real grandchild thing? I said, In the bridal suite, 12:45. Madison put her hand over her mouth. I thought you were okay with us going to the photo shoot. She said you insisted. I said, She lied to you too. Madison started crying harder. I'm so sorry. I said, You didn't do this. She did. She hugged me, tight, desperate. I let her. The rest of the reception was a blur. Dancing. Laughter. Nathan's dad gave a toast. Said, We've always thought of Heidi as our daughter. Today, it's official. Caroline cried. Eleanor danced with Nathan. She told him, Take care of her. He said, Always. At 11, Nathan and I left, drove to a hotel, collapsed into bed. He said, How do you feel? I said, Free. He kissed my forehead. I fell asleep wearing my mother's locket. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard from Diane. Or Jeffrey. Madison texted once. I understand if you hate me. I replied, I don't hate you. I just need space. She said, Okay. I love you. I didn't respond. People ask if I regret it, exposing her like that. I don't. She had 13 years to tell me the truth. I gave her one speech. The trust fund was dispersed 2 weeks ago. $3.6 million in my account. I donated $500,000 to adoption support charities, in Catherine's name. The money's nice. But what I got that day wasn't money. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too much. I wasn't unworthy. I was just inconvenient to the wrong person's plan. I have Sunday dinners with Eleanor now. Every week. She tells me stories about Catherine, shows me photos, teaches me how to make her recipes. Last Sunday, she said, "You know, Catherine had your laugh and your stubbornness." I said, "Is that a compliment?" She said, "It's the best compliment I can give." Nathan's parents are in my phone as mom and dad now. They insisted. Caroline said, "We've been waiting 10 years to make it official." Lawrence stops by once a month, checks on me, makes sure I'm okay. Last time, he brought flowers. He said, "Catherine would be proud, not because you got the money, because you stood up." I have a family now. I always did. I just didn't know where to look. Nathan asked me last night if I'll ever forgive Diane. I said I don't know. Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation, and I don't owe her my peace. He said, "What do you owe her?" I said, "Nothing, that's the point." He nodded. We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "Do you think I'm a bad person? For what I did?" He said, "No. I think you're someone who finally chose herself." I thought about that. He's right. For 28 years, I made myself smaller, quieter, less. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, achieved more, stayed quieter, they'd see me, but they never did. Because they didn't want to. There's a photo on my mantle now, from the wedding. It's cropped. Just me, Nathan, Eleanor, Lawrence, Andrew, and Caroline. The family I chose. Someone asked me last week why I didn't include Madison. I said, "She's still figuring out who she is without our mother's script." They said, "Will you let her back in?" I said, "Maybe. When she's ready. When I'm ready. But not now. Right now, I'm learning what it feels like to be wanted. Not conditionally. Not when it's convenient. Just wanted. If you're reading this, if you've ever felt like you don't matter, like your family forgets you, overlooks you, replaces you, I need you to know something. It's not you. It was never you. Some people aren't capable of seeing your worth, and that's their loss, not yours. You don't owe anyone your peace, not even family. Especially not family who makes you feel like a ghost in your own life. I spent 28 years waiting for my parents to choose me. They never did. So I chose myself, and that made all the difference. Eleanor gave me something last week. A box. Small. Wooden. Carved with flowers. She said, "Your mother left this for you. I was supposed to give it to you when you turned 18, but I couldn't. So I'm giving it to you now." Inside was a necklace, a small silver pendant, a tree, and a note. "My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I need you to know, you are not an accident. You are not a burden. You are the best thing I ever did. Grow strong. Grow tall. And never let anyone make you feel small. I love you. Mom." I wore it today. I wear it every day now. Catherine's locket around my neck. Her pendant over my heart. Two mothers. One I never met. One who tried to erase me. And somehow, the one I never met loved me more. Nathan and I are looking at houses now. 3 bedrooms. One for us. One for an office. One for, someday, a kid. Eleanor said, "You'll be a wonderful mother?" I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because you know what it feels like to be unseen. You'll never let your child feel that way." I hope she's right. I think about that a lot. About breaking cycles. About being the parent I needed. About showing up. Last week, I got a voicemail. From Diane. I almost deleted it. But I listened. Her voice was shaking. She said, "Heidi, I know you don't want to talk to me. I understand. But I need you to know, I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. I thought. I don't know what I thought. I was scared. Of losing your father. Of losing control. Of you outgrowing me. I made terrible choices. And I hurt you. I'm sorry. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You didn't deserve any of it. You deserved better. You deserved a mother who saw you. And I didn't. I'm sorry." She hung up. I saved the voicemail. I haven't called her back. I don't know if I will, but I saved it. Because maybe someday I'll be ready to hear it. Or maybe I won't. And that's okay too. People ask me what I learned from all this. I learned that love shouldn't be earned. I learned that silence can be more powerful than shouting. I learned that chosen family is just as real as blood family. Maybe more real. Because chosen family shows up. They don't make you beg for a seat at the table. They pull out the chair. And they stay. 3 weeks ago, I walked down an aisle with a man I'd never met until 6 months before. He wasn't my father. But he was the man who saw my worth when the people who raised me couldn't. Two strangers sat in my parents' seats. But they weren't strangers. They were my grandmother, my advocate, my truth. And when my parents came back, late, flustered, entitled, they learned something they should have known 28 years ago. I am enough. I was always enough. And I don't need their permission to believe it anymore. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been replaced at your own event? Have you ever felt like the backup plan in your own family? What would you have done? Would you have saved their seats? Or would you have let someone who actually loved you sit there instead? Tell me in the comments, because I think a lot of us carry this weight, the weight of being unseen. And I want you to know, you're not alone. You were never the problem. And you don't owe anyone your silence. Not anymore. I have a family now. I always did. I just didn't know where to look. And neither did they. Until I walked down that aisle and showed them exactly who I was. Enough. I was always enough.